Just Talk is brought to you by Bard and Kin Production in association with Hunter College and Hip P Clothing.
Grab your notebooks.
And heed,
It's Just Talk Literary Podcast.
where we read.
And then we talk. Oh my
So
god.
cheesy.
Nah, it sounds great. We're ramen out here.
This is episode 1 of our literary series on communication. In today's episode, we'll be talking about William Shakespeare's Othello.
Oh, that's a controversial one for sure.
Indeed, it is. And imagine if Othello and Desdemona communicated their fears and suspicions towards each other.
Why imagine? They definitely had times to communicate.
And if they did?
They might be alive.
Maybe. We're not here to speculate, but instead, we're here to show their death was only part of a failure in their patriarchal society.
And maybe we can talk about how communication, or lack thereof, is part of that patriarchal norm.
Yes, so without further ado,
Let's time travel to 16th century England with Willie Shakes.
on Just Talk Literary Podcast,
Episode 1, Othello
with your host Amanda Ramos.
and Jonathan Toro.
Spoiler alert!
On the surface, Othello is a story of jealousy, love, and reputation.
Deeper, it broaches themes of race, patriarchal norms, trust, and communication.
You know, I always thought the play should be called Iago. I always felt it was his revenge story.
What do you mean?
Wasn't his whole plot of revenge against Othello for promoting Cassio?
That's true. It's in this opening scene that Iago starts to express his discontent for Othello to his friend Roderigo.
Friend. Rodrigo is not a friend. He's more of a tool villain.
What's a tool villain?
It's a character used by the main villain, in this case Iago, to enact his machinations.
So the main plot is with Othello and Desdemona and their struggle to consummate their marriage due to war, jealousy, and miscommunication.
And Iago.
This main plot will come to a dismal end for the lovers.
With the backdrop of the invading Turkish army on their wedding night, Othello and Desdemona experience their first struggles with marriage. The sad part is, they never have a moment to consummate their marriage. As soon as Desdemona confesses her honest love for Othello, they are sent to battle the Turks, and then they are swirling in Iago's plot.
There are a few subplots. One is Roderigo's attempt to win over Desdemona by helping in Iago's plan.
Then there's Iago and his plot against the couple.
Iago uses the handkerchief as a final device to finish his scheme.
Besides Rodrigo and Iago's personal plots, even goals, what else do we have?
We have Cassio, the newly promoted lieutenant, trying to clear his name with Desdemona.
Are there any more subplots, Amanda?
Smaller ones, there's the subplot with Bianca, Cassio's girl. She is also who Cassio talks about with Iago when Othello thinks he's speaking about Desdemona.
Right, you're right. It's this discussion that fuels Othello's rage and jealousy.
Then there's Emilia's plotline.
Iago's wife?
Yeah, and Desdemona's maid.
I remember she tries to thwart Iago's plan.
This last subplot is with Desdemona, and it's the simplest. She wants to talk to Othello about what's going on so they can be happy.
But Othello won't listen, won't give her the time of day.
The play ends with Othello confronting Desdemona about the handkerchief and her affair with Cassio.
But not listening, he smothers her with a pillow. She dies.
Realizing what he has done, Othello kills himself.
So tragic, so beautiful, so Willie Shake.
Alright, now that you all have a little insight on Othello, let's dive deeper into communication.
Or lack thereof. I guess I want to start this discussion with a text that I read by Eamon Grennan. The text is called The Woman's Voice in Othello, Speech, Song, and Silence. The first thing that the essay opened up with was Amelia's quote in Act 5, Scene 2. And she says this line, "I am bound to speak."
I honestly thought when you were talking about that, I am bound to speak, that she feels obligated to speak up for Desdemona because
Yes,
of their bond.
right, right. And I think it's interesting for a couple reasons why she says this line. First, it does kind of show how communication is so important in this play. We have a character literally saying, I am bound, I am almost obligated to speak, you know. But on the other side, you can look at bound as that word to um, lock someone into speech so they can't speak. So there's kind of a lot of double meaning here. But I also think it's interesting because where she is saying this. One thing that I noticed is a division in communication. We have a public sphere of communication and a private sphere of communication. And the public sphere of communication is run by men. Not saying all right, the whole society is run by men, but but the public sphere, you know, it's where a woman can't even speak up to a man, essentially. While in a private sphere, you have kind of this freedom of where women can speak to each other or say what they truly want to say. We have a scene in Othello where Amelia and Desdemona are together in private.
Yeah.
And in private, they speak about marriage and the patriarchal society. They
Yeah,
even
they're free to speak basically. You
right to the
know, they're not bound to any
bound.
social dimensions or like social class or anything. There's just like two women alone, not in the presence of men. It's a private sphere that you were talking about.
When these women are together in private, they start singing. They start singing a song. And so like you have this just interesting moment in where in private, like we're saying, they're free to communicate on anything they want to singing. But in public, these women don't say a word. Grennan has this one quote, and he writes, one might also refer to the atmosphere of private freedom within this protected feminine enclosure, which the
Hmm.
men, Othello, Lodovico, and the attendants have just left. In the presence of men, they don't feel this private freedom. Um,
Hmm.
and it kind of goes to this other essay I read, and I won't go too deep into it, by Sarah Mendelson and Patricia Crawford about women in early modern England. This is a quote: marriage was experienced in bodily as well as in social terms. And so we see here how these women are bodily experiencing communication through this patriarchal norm. And so when the male body is in, their bodies feel hindrance, their bodies don't feel like they can sing, they can speak about any matters, may them be sexual, about marriage or anything. But when
Hmm.
these men's bodies are out, these women's bodies are opened, or free is a better word. And so you see this correlation between the body and communication and this social patriarchal norm. Last thing I want to mention is communication and silence, and how communication um, is not just talking and singing, and it's not also the body, it's also what is not said. And when we connect the silence to the private and public world, there's one character in particular that we can't forget, Bianca, and
Yes.
where she kind of um, breaks this idea of silence in the a woman's silence in the public world.
Goes into what I was going to talk about involving class.
We can end it right there. You guys
Uh-huh.
enjoy this commercial that's about to pop up. It's from our sponsors.
Look good and ready with Hip Pea clothing. Amor Boni You. Try today our latest. A strawberry and mummy-colored handkerchief, inspired by the magic of Othello. Order now, and received 2 handkerchiefs sewn by Bianca for $19.95. Hip Pea clothing. Amor Boni You. Available on Alibaba.
So we were just discussing public sphere and Bianca and how she kind of breaks the conventions of how a woman acts in the public sphere by breaking her silence.
Yeah, what you were saying about Bianca's social class and that she has the freedom to speak is because she is what you call a street woman.
Yep.
Rebecca Olson, in her article "Too Gentle," where she talks about jealousy in class, she quotes this woman, Julia Dusenbear. I probably butchered her name. A
Mhm.
whore is always lower class. To call a woman a whore, as Othello does Desdemona, not only casts aspersions on her morals, but takes away her position in society. Cassio does go to Bianca and ask her to replicate the design on the handkerchief. Bianca is outraged and accuses Cassio of having another woman. She is the only character that openly expresses jealousy. My theory is that the fact that because of her social status, she has the freedom to be vocal about her feelings.
Mm.
Because it plays into what you were saying about the private sphere, that Emilia and Desdemona took that space to be open about their feelings. Meanwhile, Bianca, in front of everybody, was like, airing her dirty laundry and was like, "You have another woman, how dare you?"
Mm-hmm.
And it reminds me of what Rebecca Olson says, that a lot of Shakespeare's most jealous husbands are married to the only children of important men. She says in her essay that because of Desdemona's social location, her position as a female heir of a senator provides a powerful catalyst for the kind of intense jealousy her husband develops.
And we have a scene in Romeo and Juliet where Juliet lies to her father about the wedding day. This is Act 4,
Mhm.
Scene 2. I think this too kind of expresses what you're talking about of um, social dynamics, social class, and gender roles. Here is where Juliet is again in a public sphere with a man,
Mhm.
but she almost does what Bianca does. And by lying to her father, she's kind of taking control of her voice, her body, her space.
There could be comparisons between Juliet and Desdemona as far as going above their gender roles of the time. Desdemona does a similar thing where she goes against her father's wishes. One of the last lines that Brabantio says to Othello is, "Look to her more, if thou hast eyes to see. She has deceived her father and made thee."
Hmm, hmm.
So she lied to her father.
Um,
Yes.
and so that moment is a big moment of them communicating to each other. I see you. Here's the power, but be forewarned of not just Desdemona, but women. That's how I read that.
That is so funny that you said that, because that's exactly what Rebecca Olson talks about, where women are possessions
Mm,
and that there's something to be coveted. And
mm-hmm,
because of Desdemona's role in the social class,
mm-hmm,
she is something that is desired, because we see Roderigo
mm-hmm.
desperate to get her back.
No, I think you're right though that there's this interconnection between social class
Yes.
and communication.
Yes.
And communication for us has been a little redefined.
Yeah.
Communication includes the body, it
Mhm.
includes the voice, and it includes the mind.
Yeah.
Um, it includes silence and it includes listening. And when we look at that, um, there's a big failure of communication in Othello.
Not only that, but the wrong things are being communicated. That's where the tragedy lies.
Right. And I don't think what we see in Shakespeare time allows the woman to fully have control of her body and her voice and all that stuff. And Othello, I know it's a play about racism and all these other heavy
I mean,
topics,
it's in the overall theme is
mhm,
racism,
but I think it's also a lot about communication and the lack of communication, which is
Yes.
silence.
Hey, friends, so we're done.
Before we go, I want to mention A Midsummer Night's Dream 2 and how lack of communication is part of the story and patriarchal like Othello.
John, save that for the next episode, please.
But why?
We've said enough about Othello. We've referred to Romeo and Juliet and even brought in different texts. Let's give our listeners a break.
But Amanda, I am bound to speak.
John, don't give me Amelia.
Fine, so I guess we're done. We hope you enjoyed season 1, episode 1 on Willie Shake's Othello.
We enjoyed creating this episode for you.
And can't wait to release episode 2 on A Midsummer's Night Dream.
We want to give a special thanks to Gia Hollis, Hunter College, and all our sponsors.
Also, tell us if you agree or disagree with the arguments. This is a place for discourse and learning. 1,000 goodbyes.
Parting is such a sweet sorrow.